Some great OTT only, some very direct TV only panelists here. And so with that, I'm going to just quickly introduce everyone, myself, and then I'm going to get into a question. And then after that, I think there's two things. One is, I see a lot of familiar faces in this audience. I think there are some good questions out in the audience here. I would like you guys to think about some of how OTT and TV are or are not playing nicely together right now. I think that there is a perception out there of how well they either do or do not play together. So Eric joins us from Cinedigm, a leading independent entertainment studio in North America. They're known for their content marketing and distribution channels. Next is Phoenix Gonzalez from dotstudioPRO, video management and distribution platform. They provide syndication opportunities for their video content libraries. Mark Lieberman, Viamedia, provides local television media sales teams in over 70 markets across the U.S. Not only sales, but technical products as well that go way beyond the traditional products that we know and serve today. Next up, Kasha, Cacy from the Engine Group. They help large global brands and advertisers across digital transformation and all types of media, from TV to digital out of home, really an amazing broad company. And then finally, we do have Charles Chu from Brightcove. And Brightcove's a dominant OTT player that has really expanded to become a diversified video marketplace, just beyond what I think a lot of us traditionally knew OTT as. So Charles, thank you for being here. Thank you everyone else for being here today. I'm going to start out with the first question. Is there a time, and I'm going to actually ask this one to the panel, is there a time when we stop talking about OTT and TV and we just talk about video and we just talk about how it's performing and we don't worry about what channel it's going down, or did you describe OTT or TVE or TV correctly? Do you think that time's coming? Eric.
I'll take it first. Well, I think really when you talk about OTT, we're talking literally about a mode of delivery, right? But we're also talking about a mode of consumption, which is shifting from time-based appointment viewing to viewing when, where, and however you want to consume content. So I think we're at a point today where I just saw a pretty good research. I can't recall the research firm that said about of all digital ad impressions, about half of them are now happening on connected televisions. I think that data point is maybe even understated to some degree, but I think it represents a pretty dramatic shift in consumptive behavior. I think we all, are focus groups of one, and look at our own behavior and say, you spend more and more of your time in Netflix and Amazon and in a variety of virtual MVPDs and apps, and I think while the predominant mode of viewing is still linear, is still in a linear capacity, I think just the total hours consumed, it's dramatically growing. So I think there's, if you look at the key thing to look at is market size, and then the ability of OTT delivery mechanism to fit that market size. And I think we're very close on both of those points.
Well, I look at it from an end consumer's perspective. They don't even know what the word OTT means.
That's right.
So I think that the reality is for them is television.
Yeah.
So I think it's us as an industry that are still waking up to the idea that there is no difference at the end of the day, although there are grave differences. I think that if we look at the amount of market consolidation that's happening right now, I think that it's forcing us all into a place where we recognize that we're moving away from linear versus OTT.
Sure.
It's just at the end of the day a mechanism for us to reach the end consumer, and due to that, whether it's advertising, subscriptions, transactions, it's all just a part of the ecosystem. If you look at the cable industry and how customers are buying subscriptions or watching with ads, it's the same thing on OTT. That's my perspective.
In the spirit, I think OTT phenomenally disruptive, and in the spirit of being disruptive.
Oh my God! Oh wow! There's security! Security!
My kids, it won't fit. So.
Get security!
And make sure Nick knows I'm doing
There
that.
you go.
But I think we're not there yet.
Yeah.
In terms of your question, David, is that can you just buy an impression and whether it's distributed on
Right.
traditional television or OTT? Certainly not there yet. We focus on the local ad business, and our legacy of our business was running, or is running, the cable ad sales for 60 cable companies around the country, from Google Fiber to CenturyLink, and that's the
Right.
2 to 3 minutes an hour that you see on every single cable network. And we have 125 salespeople, and our mantra now is actually that we say to them, we're not selling TV first, we're not selling digital first, we're selling audiences on any piece of glass.
There you go.
Yep.
Right? And as you said, they don't know from OTT. Having said that, it's easier said than done to be able to do that. And that's the main challenge. OTT, there's still viewability issues, video completion rate challenges. When you go out into the open exchanges, you don't really know what you're buying, what the quality is.
Yep.
But when you buy linear TV, you know what you're buying. You can actually place it exactly in the programs that you want. And OTT, we see as really just an extension, reach extension. And that's how it's treated today. 5 years from now, I think that will change, but it's not there yet.
Kasha.
So I look at it from the point of view of my clients. So most of my clients think in terms of video, not TV or OTT or any of the myriad of variations in between. So most of the clients that I work with are planning in terms of they want video to reach a certain audience. The trick becomes in reaching the certain audience. So TV, the ratings continue to go down. There are audiences that have become very difficult to reach in that environment. So you need to add other video elements to it. Video is not at a scale, nonlinear video is not at a scale where it can run independently on its own. So in my mind, as long as the consumer is moving around the way the consumer is moving around, we can think in video, but executionally we're going to have to manage across all that, which is quite a bit of complexity for any brand or agency to maneuver, but that's the challenge that we've all got to face if we're going to reach audiences in the same way we did years ago on linear TV.
Charles.
I think we will continue to talk about linear TV versus OTT for as long as most of us are going to be working professionally. And I think the conversation, the elements of the conversation are just going to change.
Okay.
Right? As Kasha said, a lot of the conversation now is just being able to subdivide OTT. Like, what are you actually talking about? Right? Are you talking about someone watching on their mobile phone while they're commuting to work?
Yeah.
Is that OTT? Or is OTT a linear, a quasi-linear channel that just happens to be an app on a smart TV, but the person is actually still sitting in their family room, right? So delivery is interesting to a lot of people right now, just being able to reach everyone. I have a commercial service, just ka-chunking out the apps for each of those devices is like sort of, at the food, water, shelter stage, right? But as we progress, I think we will all become more sophisticated around understanding the viewership patterns. When is it the appropriate time to serve someone an ad? Do I choose to have more short form content because my subscribers, I know that person is on a train for half an hour every day, right? And I know they don't want to consume a 2-hour movie. Right, so a lot of these things I think we are still learning, but the notion of OTT and how it mends with TV, I think we're going to still have those types of conversations.
So you're saying it's going to take a while, and I'm going to ask all of our panelists to speak up just a little bit, I know for the folks in the back of the room, but you're saying it's going to take a while. Let me challenge you there for 1 second. Which do you think is moving faster than from a technical standpoint? Do you think that TV is actually trying to change quicker now and become more addressable, measurable, all the things that we have in digital, right? Or do you think digital is still trying to outrun linear and trying to beat them sort of to the end zone? Let's use that analogy while we're here. Really beat them to the end right there. Which way do you think that's going? Who's accelerating faster right now? TV, traditional TV, or digital OTT?
So since we are sitting here, in football, when they review what happened in the last game, the common nomenclature is still, all right, let's go check the tape,
Yeah.
right? There is no actual tape, right? It's a digital recording. So I would actually challenge all of us to think about our own definition of TV. I have a 22-year-old kid, mercifully just graduated from college. What does TV mean to him? It's entertainment. I have an 11-year-old daughter who only watches Netflix. She has no idea, when I say, who are the big three? Big three what? Right? So it's. I think it's more about a perspective around entertainment and how we deliver entertainment or news, as opposed to us thinking about the world in our sort of 1985 framework. Sorry.
Well, the counter to that, I think, is how quickly and easily is it going to be to move off of linear TV, most likely a paid service model. And right now, the vast majority of broadband in this company is delivered by cable providers who have costed the packages in a way that there isn't really a great incentive for cutting cable off.
Right.
They increasingly offer on-demand services, replay services. So even the idea of linear TV is not a very well sort of defined capability in terms of the way we used to think of linear TV. So until we have a high-speed broadband service that is not primarily cable-based, I think you will have people tuning into linear TV, how they tune in, and whether that's on a time frame that the TV providers want it to be on, or whether it's in real time, is another story. But again, I think it's an argument for sort of a big messy soup for the next 5-10 years.
So what you just described is where we live, and since we run the ad business for 60 different cable companies or MVPDs around the country, and right now we had our conference midsummer, and CEO of a company unnamed company, good size MVPD, said for every video sub he loses, they become more profitable. Because broadband is where they're making their money. So it used to be, I'll sell you broadband if you're a cable subscriber. Now the tail's wagging the dog.
Yeah.
And with the explosion now of TV programming, and we really are going through a renaissance when it comes to any kind of programming to be able to watch, how do you monetize all the costs for that content development? And there's only two ways you can monetize right now, either subscription or advertising. And it's cut about evenly, $150 billion industry, half of which is advertising, half of which is subscription. And so advertising is always going to play a critical role in supporting that. Advertising goes away, you won't have as much content.
Well, and if you add up the cost of broadband plus a whole bunch of subscriptions, I think the promise is that it's more cost effective. It's not. I mean, everybody's coming out with their $5 subscription model.
Right, for the plus.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as it pertains to content, actually, it's good thinking. Just sort of, Eric, you once described you believe that Cinedigm could sort of be an arms merchant because of the content that you own. Is that a Lord of War reference, by the way? Number one. Number two, do you have that? Is that under your subscription belt? Because I love that movie.
We have
Nick Cage movie, but
we have other less desirable Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, perfect. So let's talk about content for a second. I mean, these traditional broadcasters, they made a lot of this content and they own it. And now it's distributing onto these other channels that they don't necessarily own, and they've had to rethink their relationships in a lot of ways. You're at the center of that. What are you seeing? And then Phoenix, I know you have a lot of experience with this as well.
Well, I think the big trend there, if you see some of these mega deals that are being announced, around Seinfeld and Friends and others, I think the big reason, the obvious thing is, hey, why is Warner Brothers selling their show to somebody else? And it comes down to some recent legal cases that essentially slap the hands of the studios self-dealing content themselves at overly favorable terms. So I think there's all kinds of profit participants, there's producers, so they have an obligation as the distribution partner to maximize the revenue for all parties involved. They can't self-deal. So what you're seeing is Comcast paying full freight and competing with Netflix and others. And that's a trend that's going to continue. But I think the broader consensus among my peers is this is a great time to be a content owner. You have 8 to 10 new scale services coming over the next 18 months. All of them with multi-billion-dollar content budgets. And that's just in North America. Add in Europe, add in India, which is a very hot market right now. My company believes the Chinese market will be more receptive to U.S. content if the trade war settles down. Putting that aside for a moment. But I think that's content has gone through cycles of being more valuable and less valuable, and I think you look at Netflix, for example, in 2008, the digital right, when they launched the streaming service, the digital value of content was limited because there was not a lot of ways to monetize it. And they built a $120 billion market cap business on the back of everyone else's content. I think the companies in the game right now just are finally have woken up to the fact that they need to do it themselves.
A big part of our business in the last year has become syndication. I think, when customers come to me, it's no longer just what's your direct-to-consumer strategy, it's what's your content strategy, what's your content monetization strategy. Clients really have an opportunity now, rights holders, people who own libraries, to really expand their monetization through third-party platforms that already have the eyeballs. In some cases, it doesn't even make sense for a client to launch an OTT platform of their own. It's more advantageous for them to start out with syndication and get their content in as many platforms as they possibly can. I had a client come to me who has a $13 million library that they were like, well, should I license it to Netflix or should I just give it and syndicate it? And I said, that's a really important question you have to ask yourself and your investors, because yes, you can do a license deal with a Netflix and be locked in for 7 years, or you could roll the dice and you could literally go out and take it to every platform that already has eyeballs and monetize it through ads. And right now we're delivering to over 40 platforms. There's probably another 100 that we can deliver to that have audiences already that are monetizing through ad-supported models. A lot of people are only looking at North America, but like you said, the international markets are hungry for U.S. content. So it's a great time to be a content owner and really, carve out a really nice strategy for yourself.
So we've talked a lot about it. We've gone in a couple different directions, from the content side to the monetization and the delivery side. In the audience, are there any questions that you'd like to ask this panel? It's a great panel, a lot of diverse opinions here. Happy to take a couple questions. I can continue to go down this path, but why don't I first start? Anyone out there?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go.
I had a question for Mark.
Clint?
First, you mentioned earlier, like, it's not quite there yet from an advertiser's perspective, right? So I think that's super interesting. What is the expectation, though, for it to be there? Is the expectation that it's going to mirror the same performance or consumer habits that you do with linear? Like, is that the expectation? Or?
I think there's two major challenges to transform television to become more digital. And you asked the question before, David, who's going to get there first, the digital players or the TV players? And the two main challenges are, one, training. So how do you take old line TV salespeople and have them speak two languages, right? Or as I like to say, not just digital and television or English and Spanish, but Spanglish. How do you get them to think in two different worlds, right? And we spend a huge amount of time and effort training our 125-person sales force and all the middle-level managers. The second is, and Vela had said it during the digital transformation panel earlier this morning, which is flow. It is how do you ease the flow between the digital side and the hermetically sealed television side when it comes to advertising. So we actually just came out with a product which we're in market trials this month called QTT, not OTT, but QTT, in which what it does is we're not building a programmatic platform, we're relying on the programmatic players on the digital side, and so they can now access linear TV and actually do ad decisioning in real time. So they can place ads in real time. We're not building a programmatic platform, we're relying on them. So working with companies like Rubicon and others. Now they've been able to do that for CTV or smart TVs. That's a fairly small market. Or addressable TV. Addressable is $700 million out of a $70 billion market. Now they can access the multi-billion-dollar television market, and that flow becomes that much easier. And so now the digital ecosystem can be collaborating with the TV ecosystem in a programmatic and automated way. And so I think that's what it's going to take.
You know, one of the issues, you know, as you look at both of them, is the currency is different. So in TV, you deal in GRPs. That's how it's measured. It's measured by Nielsen. Takes a little while for that to happen. OTT and other video capabilities are impression-based. So at some point, we have to reconcile that because, you know, a brand and an agency who's planning to try to get a message out, you know, there's workarounds, but, you know, the goal is that you're not sort of doing a translation constantly as we move into this integrated world. And I think we're still a little ways away from that. I think, you know, we'll get there, but one of the fundamental things we're going to have to sort of decide is, you know, what is the currency that we're trading in, and is it an individual or is it a group of people, and how do we think about that?
And just to add to that, in terms of the education, it's not just educating our salespeople, but working with the agencies, to either educate them or have them educate us. So on the rollout of QTT, we're actually collaborating with Engine and some of their advertisers to understand how you can actually do that and make sense of it, what are the inventory allocations, what should the rates be, is it CPM-based, GRP-based, impression-based, and so that we need to do that in order to understand how to roll this out.
Can I add an addendum to my question?
Please.
Live linear changing the landscape at all when it comes to that?
Live linear, defined
For
as
Linear
OTT.
on OTT.
What was the question again?
Linear on
OTT.
OTT.
Is that
Linear
is
on
that sort
OTT,
of
yep.
helping define that a bit more in terms of the currency, because the currency essentially sort of becomes similar.
Yeah, but most of those live linear work the same as a cable.
Right.
It's the same monetization strategy as a cable network. I don't know whether they can insert ads
Go ahead,
dynamically.
yeah.
So
I could talk to that because we operate 9, they're known as fast free ad supported television. I think this is you know, I've done a lot in digital over the last 20 years, and I have to say this is the fastest adoption of any you know, sort of consumer consumption model I've seen yet.
Fast is the fastest?
Fast is the
Yeah.
fastest.
Got it, okay.
And
Eric, can you give some examples of some of those,
Yeah.
those channels that you're working with on the live linear?
yeah, so you know, examples of the kinds of channels that are doing incredibly well. I mean, CBSN is a major one.
Yep.
Cheddar is
Cheddar.
one we hear
Yep.
we hear a lot about. Pluto has.
Is
you know,
Pluto, yeah, they have their,
so they have their own app, and
Yeah.
but they're syndicating those out
Right.
into other. So
Right.
the big reason for the rapid rise in adoption is every major television manufacturer is basically baking free ad supported channels into the tuner. So when you go today, if you went to Best Buy, you bought a brand new Samsung television, you plug it in, create an account. Now you've got their marketing that you have 200 channels of free cable. So, you know, if you think about how many of these units are sold and how quick the replacement cycle is on these big widescreen TVs due to the cheap costs, you're looking at, you know, 30 to 40 million of these appearing in living rooms every year. So if you think about it on the replacement cycle, within the next 4 to 6 years, pretty much every household that could have one of these is going to have one. So you combine 200 free linear, combine that with some of the broadcast capture tech that's being baked into these, where you know you can get the ABC, NBC, CBS, and others baked in, plus your Netflix, Hulu, and so on. to me, that bodes very badly when you add all of that on top of the already aggressive rate that cord cutting is accelerating. So that's just, but that is, it's one piece of the equation that is sort of changing the adoption rate pretty quickly.
I mean, how much does 5G change this? Because I feel like that's really the technology that's out there that delivers broadband access outside of the cable providers. And I think that's a tipping point we have to be watching, because I think we're still in this place of, you know, you need the broadband access, and the broadband access and the linear TV are commingled right now.
And as long as the ISPs or MVPDs control the pipe into the home,
Yeah.
then they'll continue to arbitrate that.
Yeah.
On that live, on those live capabilities, Charles, I know that Brightcove's had to evolve a lot in and around that, distributing live, right? And how are you guys factoring in when considering your product mix, you know, where you're going next? How much does live play into your thinking at Brightcove?
A ton. It's interesting listening to other folks on the panel. While I think there's this sort of conceptual model, how do I measure across these different channels, what we see is when our customers start broadcasting live linear and delivered through an OTT app, they immediately make the commercial model change, right? They come to us and like, great, splice out that ad, drop it in that, you know, whatever geeky term, right? You know, now we want to start shipping tailored ads to that specific subscriber or that group of cohorts or whatever it is. So from an advertising perspective, I think people aren't waiting to normalize having this sort of common currency across the different channels. They're acting pretty immediately. Yeah. And although this is not our business per se, what we're asked to do is to accommodate evolving monetization models.
Right.
There's in India, they're the largest sports gaming site, has now transitioned to an app. They now are starting to buy content. And then as they broadcast content through their apps, their spin on it is they additionally monetize, because before this cricket bowler throws, I'm not a cricket fan, right? But you know, before he bowls the next ball, because they control the live linear content, they can say, you now have this 15-second window, is this going to be a strike or not? And you can make sort of in-game bets, and the value of the content is now monetized through a completely non-traditional way.
Great. I saw a question back there. Go ahead.
Really insightful comments along the lines with content and advertising and platform. Just a little leveling. 5G is certainly a ways out, but ATSC 3.0 is here now for the broadcasters, and so the broadcasters are going to be able to have a two-way mechanism of some sort to be able to deliver it back and forth. Let's look at that. Internet 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Progressively, we've become very much normalized when it comes to this kind of offering. To Eric's comment, is like spot on. What the broadcasters are really building into their services, this ad compliant service platform, Pluto, now testing out in the UK. But there's much more I could address. The fact of it is, I want to come back to what you said right at the beginning, Mark, that kind of piqued my curiosity, because you said completion rates. And completion rates have been proven out over years that television viewing, remote controls was the bane of television viewing, because people change. They never really complete a program as they watch as well. So that same thing comes back to brand building. Within 8 to 10 seconds of brand advertising is when that message comes to the viewer. You brought up completion rates, and I'm curious about how you're equating that to IP delivery versus linear delivery, because you're actually seeing more completion rates with IP than you are linear, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are behind that comment.
Yes.
I do know that on the linear TV side, it's brand safe. because before an ad goes up on any kind of cable network, you've got to go through QA, making sure no salacious material, no pornography, no et cetera, and the comm compliance, so there's no audio spiking. So that all has to happen in television. And so for the major brands, they know if they're advertising on traditional television, is that it's going to be brand safe. Whereas in the digital world, on pure digital, not OTT, but pure digital, that's a little bit more of an unknown factor. And what you want to be able to do is get the best of both worlds, is have it be brand safe, but use the best of digital in terms of the targetability, impression-based, only charge on a completion rate, defined completion. And what was interesting is when we first started working with some of the digital players that wanted to go into television on the MVPD side, cable company side, they were talking about what's a video exposure? 1 to 3 seconds. 1 to 3 seconds, and that's how they were going to charge the advertiser. A lot different in traditional linear TV. That wouldn't fly. So there needs to be a commonality between the two, and those rules are being written as we speak.
I think it comes back to Charles' comment, television, the definition of television. Because definition of television is television. Today, it's video distribution platform agnostic.
But even, your question's interesting, because we grappled with this with one of our clients, where we were buying OTT and we were buying linear TV, and we were measuring the OTT on a completion rate, and it didn't perform well against TV. You don't measure TV on a completion rate. You measure TV based on what's been broadcast out and who happened to be watching the show around it. So, you know, the measurement's only important because you have to start getting apples to apples, and it takes time for advertisers to really work through what does an apples to apples comparison look like, and then how do we pay for those apples once we figure out what the apples are.
Especially when the currency only has 50,000 homes in the United States out of the 110 million homes that have television.
Eric, go ahead, and then I know that guy in the front row has a quick comment. So
addressing your point on ad viewability, I think, you know, a lot of the data that we're talking about here is sort of tainted by web video, browser-based video, terrible completion rates in mobile. Connected TV is a game changer. I'm looking at data that matches very close to TV on OTT and FAST platforms on ad viewability. I'm looking at, but here's another thing to address your point. When we talk about you know, channel switching, channel surfing, you don't know you can't tell, you know, what's happening at the individual level in broadcast. You get an aggregated view of an audience that is based off of panels and other things. With OTT, I know and I can see the data directly because not to get too technical, but when I'm doing server-side ad inclusion to have a TV-like experience, I'm calling the ads in advance and queuing them. So if I called and queued the ad, and then I go to deliver it, and the user's no longer there, well, I don't get, the advertiser doesn't pay for that ad, right? And I can take those metrics, and the advertiser can get access to those kinds of metrics. So my point is, you know, it's still early days. We're talking about a technology that didn't exist, you know, 18 to 24 months ago. But what I'm seeing is incredibly promising, and for brands that are looking to reach cohorts that are increasingly difficult to reach in television, it's a big opportunity.
Sorry.
and then I'm going to go ahead, Charles.
So, Brightcove, we have roughly 500 million viewers every week, right? Across a multitude of devices and countries. What Eric was talking about is some analytics that we are starting to do, which is super interesting because it starts to understand actual viewer behavior patterns. Mobile devices across the web, connected TVs, and things that are helping us understand there's no one generic pattern. That someone who has a desktop at 11 o'clock on a Monday has a very different viewing behavior pattern that's showing up on that laptop versus at 9 o'clock at night when that laptop is now most likely at home, and if it's, you know, and now they're using it to watch a movie, right? And so that's just one example of many that I think as we mature as an industry, understanding what type of advertising, when some dude's on that laptop at 11 o'clock, you know, do I want to serve them a 30-second ad? Because the guy's at work, right? Checking ESPN and the sports scores. Maybe the best thing to do is just hit them up with a 6-second ad, right? These are all sorts of things that we're trying to figure out.
Still haven't figured out yet, yeah.
I was just going to make the point, when we were talking about 70% completion rates in OTT, separating out the two dimensions that matter to completion rate are, one is at the big screen, and two, what is the content duration. So if it's a long form piece of content on a flat screen device, you're going to see 5 to 8% completion rates, which is the point that you exactly made. So
the point was that on the bigger screen, you're seeing a higher completion
With
rate
content duration.
with content duration
Yes.
than you are on the mobile device or iPad or laptop.
Kind of what Charles was saying.
Which talks to you, Charles, which is that you got to be able to serve the right content with the right device at that time. So it gets another sort of function more complicated almost. It's not just content based actually. So that's very interesting. Go right ahead. One more. Yep.
You know, as silly as it is, it's trafficking of advertising. You know, it's where the commercials are going, and as far as who is going to see it from a personalization standpoint. But I don't know if anybody's seen it, but a game changer took place today with Sean's company, Doherty's company called Whirl. Whirl has the ability, and I'm not with Whirl, this is my category. You know, they're managing 1 billion views a day. And they're able to traffic that content via all sorts of both linear and IP. That is an opening for a real interesting new kinds of measurement capabilities. I agree with your comments when it comes to where it's at today, but that's kind of the old school paralyzing comment that paralyzes the industry versus what Ari's talking about, that's opening it up and with the availability of the content. So while we need to monetize it, and advertising is a part of it, subscription is too, but it's the vast amounts of content that's available for everybody in this room watches what they want to watch when they want. We're all longtime fans of television, particularly sports. Here we are in this stadium. Live broadcast over IP is booming. Esports is booming. So I don't see it as a 5-year window. I see it a little tighter than that. And it's the agencies that have to kind of find that model, not companies like Brightcove or Cinemark. They've got it. They're distributing it out.
I'm in no way meaning to paralyze the industry. Not my intention. I do think it's important to recognize, though, as OTT is right now a little bit of the Wild West, in that there's lots of different players, and consolidating all of that, getting the data from all of those players to understand what's happening and to measure it in a way that you can equate to TV, which a lot of brands still need for a lot of audiences. It's why you're seeing agencies hire analytics people and data scientist people, because that business is having to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Those agencies are having to do a lot of the heavy lifting to understand measurement, reach, what you pay for something. I mean, it is not a simple thing for those agencies to do, and most agencies have to do it uniquely and bespokely to each client. It's really hard to generalize it right now. So it is. I just think it's one of the things that we've got to overcome as we move down this road.
But that is the bottleneck. The bottleneck is the major holding companies, I think, of which Engine is not one, a major holding company, is that kind of stuck in its legacy business. And that's where it becomes difficult for major advertisers to understand what the commonality of currency is across all these different media types and what their attribution is and what the ROI is. That, to me, is the major challenge.
Right? When I look at the large agencies that we engage with that buy TV, that buy linear, they buy linear, they sell linear, they make money on linear. The dollars they spend, the dollars I spend, are the really nice dinners that they provide for my team, right? I mean, they make their money that way. We didn't start buying OTT until we pushed OTT, right? It was not something that was on the radar. They're getting the right people on their teams finally, but it's still not there yet. Their model is based on linear, right? They don't want us to buy Hulu. They don't want us to buy other things. We're buying it because we forced it. and we're seeing great results, right? And so that has to change. That's the thing that has to change, is there's a lot of technology.
I agree.
Yeah, I was saying I agree when it comes to the perspective, like a lot of our clients who are smaller brands, who aren't large brands, who are entering the OTT space are actually going direct to the brands and getting the direct buy-in from the brand and cutting out, the major holding companies and a lot of the agencies, because they're getting access to niche audiences that are directly where they can actually work on the creative, deliver 5-second, 10-second, 15-second ads that they can really test and play with. And then you see them coming back year over year and buying back into our clients because they said, you know what, this was worth it for us. We got access to a niche demographic. We could target our advertising. We didn't have to deal with an agency. We could work directly with the brand. We could get access to the data, and we could really start to work with the data uniquely with that brand. And I think the more we all come together to actually help that be achievable, the better it's going to be, because I'm already seeing the smaller brands doing that, cutting out the agencies.
Eric, you see that as well, right?
Yeah. Well, and for us, we've seen the evolution from, OTT being tossed to the junior digital buyer to, then it was the experimental budget, and then now we're, it's starting to move upstream. But I think the big, if you look at sort of the macros, right? What's really going to push this faster? And what it boils down to is, since 2014, people under 25 are watching 65% less broadcast TV than they were in 2014. Millennials, 25 up to younger Gen Xers, are watching about 50% less. The only cohort that is flat or slightly growing are people over 55. And that's clustered around sports and news.
Yep.
So everything else, you're seeing 15, 20% year over year ratings declines. Meanwhile, ad rates are, they're charging more. I can't think of an industry that survives long-term charging more for getting less and missing the mark on the audience. So, I just look at
that's called the upfronts.
Exactly. So you kind of look at those macros. And I've been reading some, a lot of analysts. One group, Lightspeed, Richard Greenfield's a lot of great stuff.
Oh yeah.
There was a good conversation this week about what's the floor for cable, what's the firewall for cable television subscription, and it's sports, right? And you say, so what percentage of the audience are of current cable subscribers? They did some study and said about 38% of cable subscribers characterize themselves as hardcore sports fans, right?
Yeah.
So is that the bulwark? So now it's the time horizon to, so you got to go above that to cover for news and people that are just going to pay for it anyways.
Yeah.
So, but I say you look at that and you say, what is the television, cable television industry and the linear television industry look like at half its current size, right?
Yep. I think that's
And
right.
what's the horizon to get there? Those are the questions that, we should be.
But they'll
really
also need
exploring.
advertising.
Yeah, yes, they will.
To Kasha, basically want to understand if Engine has done any analysis on or seen any similarities in performance on digital campaigns, first connected campaigns with a true ROI focused advertiser. I mean, we're talking about data targeting here, one-to-one targeting, and have you seen that level of performance?
It's interesting. I'm sure we have. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. What I've seen more broadly is that if you can get the price points correct, that video tends to perform in a similar way. So
Can you get those price points?
that's the question.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to wrap up this section, this portion of the conference. I want to leave everyone with one word: messy. Actually, it was Kasha that mentioned it to me. I actually like it, but in a messy situation, usually opportunity is what flowers from that and comes from it. And so that's why I think we see so much opportunity. I know us at Progress Partners believe that this is still a very opportunistic market for new entrants and existings to really establish themselves in the market. So thank you all very much. Please, a round of applause. Thank you.